Hello, welcome to the show. Now, you might be scratching your head if you're looking for any positives that we want to take away from the last couple of years. But of the few worth keeping, it's probably hybrid events.
Yeah, one thing we've learned over the last year or so is that reaching an audience should be both in person and online. And there's one new product from Roland that is specifically designed for the job. So we'd like to welcome back Kriss from Holdan to run us through the product. So firstly, let's rewind a little bit before we talk about the new Roland product. What is a hybrid event switcher, Kriss?
Good question. Thank you both for having me back on. Always a pleasure. Hybrid event switchers. Essentially, it's a switching device that is going to allow you to cater for your audience at an event who are actually physically there, and also your online audience, so live streaming as well.
So how do Roland fit into this?
Well, they have a plethora of vision mixing units available,
Yeah.
and they have quite a few options that will give you that live stream element. That's the easy part, There are many switches out there that can do live streaming nowadays, it seems, because it's a forever ongoing, growing demand. But the actual vision mixing side, you've also got to cater for, what it is that you need to send locally to your audience in the venue itself. If you're going to invest in a switcher, you will almost want that switcher to be able to do as much as it can before you have to break out and bring in other devices, i.e. that switcher should be able to control what we send on a big screen that the audience can see in the venue. That might be a presentation, for example. We may also want to send a signal to the presenter on stage as a confidence monitor. And we also want to send maybe a slightly different version of the mix to our audience who are watching online. So it's really about a vision mixing unit that can cater for all of those different demands that a hybrid event will have.
So I'm sure I can find other similar products to do similar jobs to this. What are the standout USPs of these Roland switchers?
If you look at their lineup of switchers, you compare it to brands where you might just start with resolution and the amount of inputs, and then it just grows as you go further up the line. Roland have a really varied product offering where they'll have some that are really well suited for podcasting, for example, or really well suited to being for events work where you might need to drive really large 4K LED screens and you need 10-bit processing, for example. And they've got everything in between. So in terms of if you've got a certain idea as to the type of productions that you're predominantly going to be working on, there's going to be an appropriate solution for you. Obviously, there are ones that sort of try and cast the net as wide as possible and will cater for as many different types of productions as you can throw at it. But there are specialist units as well. Something that really gets overlooked with video switchers in general is audio. There's often the idea that if you're using a video switcher, you're probably going to be taking an output from an audio desk. And that's true for a lot of scenarios, but sometimes you might just want to do a small scale production, 2 presenters, 3 cameras, and 2 professional microphones. And there's not many professional video switchers out there that will allow you to use those professional microphones, i.e. XLR connectors that can supply 48 volts phantom power. Most of the Roland units will allow you to supply phantom power if they've got an XLR connector. For example, even at the sort of, let's say, entry-level side of things, they have a switch called the VR-160HD that has 2 XLR, provides you with you've got 3 inputs for your cameras, and it will even allow you to do automated switching based on who is talking. So you think podcast, small-scale productions, it's nice and easy. That technology obviously goes throughout the product range all the way to the V160, the flagship. Other than audio, you've got active scaling, a really big selling point for the Roland devices. Now, if you look at other switches, you'll probably see that they have scaling on their inputs, if they do have scaling, that is. And it will just say, scaling up, down, cross conversion. Okay. What does that actually mean? A lot of production switches, you have to set the resolution you want to work in. And if you feed in a video signal that doesn't conform to that project that you've set up, it will basically cross convert, upscale, downscale it to fit that project. And that's great. With the Roland scaling, you get active scaling. So with active scaling, you can do everything that I've just talked about with, what you can traditionally do with scaling on older or other alternative switchers. But active scaling actually gives you access to how those scalers are working, what they're actually doing. And you might want to have access to that because maybe you want to zoom in a little bit more. Maybe you want to go 110% zoomed in so you can cut the edges off whatever frame is being fed into the system. Maybe you want to reduce it. Maybe you want to just have this, taking up 50% of the frame. You want to maybe move that to the left or right-hand side of your frame. It's almost acting like an upstream keyer. So each of those ports that have scaling built into it, you have that flexibility for that video signal. You can really manipulate it much, much more so than what you can do with, let's say, traditional switchers where they're just using passive scaling.
And is that scaling activated? Is that controlled within the unit, or is it plugging in a laptop, or either?
No, you can all pretty much everything that you need to control on the Roland switchers. For example, the V160, which is the latest flagship unit, you can control physically on the unit itself. They all have a very similar menu system, which you will see either on the built-in screen, if the unit has a built-in screen, or on the multi-viewer output. And within that menu system, you can literally deep dive into each of those inputs and go into the scaling and have full control over every aspect of that scaler.
So you mentioned there, Kriss, the V160HD, which is, as you say, the flagship. Tell us why we should buy one of those.
How long have we got? Okay, so the V160, obviously, it's Roland's latest switcher. It's a 8-channel HD switcher. Now it has 8 SDI inputs and 8 HDMI inputs. You're probably thinking, okay, well, why have we got 16 inputs? It's an 8-channel HD switcher. Well, the reason is because, if you're rocking up to an event, you might not know what cameras you're dealing with, what your client is going to give you to say, like, I need to get this into the show. And with this switcher, and with a few of the other Roland switchers available as well, you can say, okay, channel 1, I want that to be HDI 1. Channel 2, I want it to be HDMI 2. Or I want it to be HDMI 8. It doesn't matter. You have, your bank of 8 channels on your switcher, and you can assign whatever you want to it, whether that be the video input sources or still images that you've loaded into the system itself. Now, just going back to the hybrid event side of things, you do also have 7 outputs. That's SDI, HDMI, and USB, a mixture of those 3. And you can assign whatever you want to those outputs. So going back to what I said earlier, if you want to just send camera 1, which is your presenter, to them, so they've got a confidence monitor, you can send that out over, SDI output 2 if you want to, and that goes to their monitor. If we want to send something to go onto the big screen for our audience, maybe it's an auxiliary mix, so a mixture between a close-up camera following the presenter on the stage and then cutting to slides, then we can do that as well. And obviously the same goes for your USB output. And that USB output, that's really where we tie in the live streaming element. You connect it to a computer, it's plug and play. You don't need to install any software. It will just show up on your computer or Mac as a webcam. And then obviously you can go live in whatever program you want to. You could also even record locally on the computer as well if you wanted to do that too.
So you mentioned all of these inputs and cameras. PTZs, they're very popular now. Of course, you guys at Holdan have a fantastic range. How do they support PTZs? What's the control? How do you go about it?
Yeah, well, the V160, not just the V160, other models as well from Roland, supports PTZ control natively to the actual switcher itself. So you get it on the local network, the same network that your PTZ cameras are connected to. And then from the V160, for example, you can control up to 16 PTZ cameras, and you can control them physically from the desk itself. Now, if you want a little bit more finesse in the control, you can use an iPad or a Mac, Windows computer, and link it to the switcher, and then you sort of get a nice graphical interface where you can use a virtual joystick.
So with the V160, Kriss, does it have your standard DVE transitions that you'd expect to find in a switcher?
Yes, yeah, it's got all the expected transitions in there. Whether or not these transitions are something you want to be using, such as a star wipe, I don't know how current those are, but transitions are in there, of course. Page peel.
Yeah.
No, you do have in all seriousness, though, you do have transitions in there available to you for you to bring up and use. Most of the time, let's be honest, you're probably going to use a mix or a wipe or a hard cut, and they have physical buttons for that.
Yeah.
And we've chatted before about the about Atomos recorders, and I believe the V160HD includes some sort of tools for triggering these products. What benefits does this bring to people using the V160?
So, I mean, if you're operating the V160 and you've got your PTZ cameras feeding into it as well, and you're trying to keep everything quite streamlined in terms of the amount of kit that you're bringing and how you're operating it. If you're using the likes of an Atomos Ninja V, which, let's face it, isn't actually that expensive in comparison to a fully fledged vision mixer, you can take a HDMI V160 and you set the V160 so that when you hit a physical trigger record button, your Atomos unit will automatically start that recording. Now, of course, that will work with all the Atomos products, not just the Ninja V. If you want to use a Neon, you can do. But it just means that, the operator doesn't need to divert their attention from the V160, to start and stop that recording.
Cool. And finally, Kriss, before we let you go, the all-important shipping date, has that been announced yet?
Yeah, shipping is pretty much due now. It's due in August. So at any point in time now, we will actually start shipping these out to customers.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Kriss. It's great to see you again. And of course, we're looking forward to September when the KitPlus show will be at Twickenham, and Holdan and hopefully some the V160HD will be on show as well. Thanks to Media Proxy for their support. You can find out why you need them at mediaproxy.com, and we'll see you next time.